friends, it's me, Jen at Snapdragon Quilting. Today I want to talk to you about how to square a quilt. And what exactly does that mean? So to square a quilt is what we do after we have pieced our top and then quilted it. And then we want to trim it up so that the quilt is square or rectangular. So to do that, we're going to need a few tools. The first thing that you need is the big table. Today I am working on my dining room table because it's the largest table I have, so it works great, especially if you've got a big quilt. Sometimes I'll use my kitchen table too, which is a little bit smaller, but it's a different height, and so do what works best for you. But the benefit of using a big table is that the bulk of the quilt has somewhere to sit and it's not pulling. Sometimes too, I will also leave the chairs around my table, so if I have a really large quilt, the bulk can fall onto the chairs instead of falling onto the floor and possibly getting dirty. I have kids, so the first thing I did was I washed my table off so it's nice and clean and I don't get my quilts dirty. All right, so after a table, you're going to need a cutting mat, and the bigger the cutting mat, the better, because then you've got more room to make longer cuts. Self-healing mats are amazing. Also a good idea to have a ruler. This is a 12.5 by 12.5 square ruler. I love to use a square ruler. I also like to use the long ruler. This is a 24-inch by 6-inch ruler. If you're squaring up a quilt and you only can get one ruler for this job, I would recommend you use the longer ruler because then you can use the square corner here if you don't have the square ruler. So if you have to use one ruler, get the long one. That's the good one. And I do have these rulers in the shop too. These are Quilter's Select rulers, and they have some nice texture on the back so they're not slip. I also like to use a ruler handle, and the nice thing about this handle is that you can just pop it right off, and then you can move it to your other ruler. So technically you only need one of these. They make it really easy to pick up a ruler. So, you know, there's a little bit of static cling on these rulers and they stick, so this makes it really easy to pick up so you don't drop it. All right, and then of course you need a rotary cutter. I like to use Martelli's rotary cutter. Use the rotary cutter you have. I also have these in the shop and the handles in the shop if you need one of those. All right, let's get started. All right, so this is the quilt that I'm going to be squaring up today. It's a mini quilt. It's the mini version of Many Moons, which is a pattern available in the shop. I decided to make a miniature version because it's so stinking cute and it uses a different technique for making circles perfect. So it's a fun one. This one is coming out very soon, and you will see it again as the cover of the pattern. But when I am squaring up my quilts, I like to start in one of the corners, and I like to leave a little bit of extra batting on the edges to create some fluff to fill up my batting so my batting isn't empty. So we're going to start here in the corner, and I like to line up the raw edge of the quilt as best as I can with the 1/4 inch mark on my ruler. And our goal here is to have straight sides and square corners. So that looks pretty good. And realize it's not going to be perfect. And our goal here is to create a straight edge so that when we put our binding on, our binding is very straight. Our binding can cover up an imperfection along the edge. So don't move your ruler to accommodate it very much. Instead, you want to make your corners really square so they all meet. And then take your rotary cutter, and I like to trim the corner. Perfect. Now, if I had a really long quilt, then I would take my longer ruler and I would put it along this edge, and I would continue that straight line down the edge of the quilt. Again, the goal is to keep this edge really, really straight so that our binding goes on straight. And then I'm going to go ahead and go back to my square ruler. Since this is a smaller quilt, I don't really need that great big ruler right now. And that looks really good. So I've made sure I'm matching this edge, and I've got a 1/4 inch over here. I'm gonna go ahead and square up this edge. And you can see why I like this ruler handle. I can hold it right in place. We're gonna rotate around and do the other side. Again, lining up my raw edge here, adding a 1/4 inch of batting, because I like my binding full. If you don't like to add extra batting, that's totally fine too. Then just go ahead and instead of putting this with that 1/4, I missed a spot. There we go. Instead of putting this extra fluff in, just set your ruler right along the edges of your quilt. So I could trim it here too and have my raw edge of my quilt top be the edge where I'm going to put my binding. When I add this extra fluff, I actually put my binding raw edge right along the raw edge of the quilt too. I just like to have a little extra fullness in the binding. So I stitch it on the same way, I just trim it a little bit bigger. We are going to do the last corner here. So again, I'm lining up this edge, and now that I've come around the end, I can line this edge up too. Get those really straight, and that looks great. I have a harder time cutting this direction. There we go. Oh, there's also a seam in there, so there's a little extra layers. All right, perfect. And now we have a nice square quilt. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today about how to square up your quilt after you've got it all quilted. And the links for all of the tools that I used today and the patterns are in the links below. Please let me know if you have any questions. Happy quilting.